Okay, the next part of our Guess My Number game is to go ahead and create a script to check the user's answer. This is a little bit more involved, so let me go over our plan for how we're going to do this. If we go over to our programming and we look at our check answer script, there are 4 parts to it. First of all, if it's too high, we want to hide the too low feedback, just in case it's already showing. And then we want to show the too high feedback. The other thing we're going to need to do is we need to decrement the tries remaining. That means we want to decrement it or subtract 1 from it. If it's 3, we want it to become 2. Similarly, if it's too low, we want to hide the too high feedback and show the too low feedback, and then decrement the tries remaining as well. If it's just right, we want to jump the user right over to our win or our success slide. And if there are no more guesses, if they've exhausted all of their guesses, we want to jump to the fail slide. So let me show you how we might go about doing this. Again, to create an advanced action, the first thing we need to do is go up to Project and click on Advanced Actions. Now this time, there are conditions that we're going to use to decide what we want our script to do. So instead of a standard action, we're going to call this a conditional action. And you notice we get a different interface here with a conditional action. I'm going to name this check answer. And the first condition that I'm going to do, I'm going to say if this condition is true. So the first condition I'm looking at is going to be, let's say if it's too high. So I'm going to click on variable, and it's asking, well, if some variable and is compared to some other thing, then do this action that we find down below. So in this case, I'm going to look for a variable, and I'm going to look for the text entry box 1, which we never named, so we just have the default text entry box 1. Now we're going to ask if it's going to be greater than in this case. So we're going to say is greater than, and we want it if the person's guess is greater than our variable. Well, in this case, we're looking for a variable, and we are looking for the random variable. So if their guess is greater than random, then we want to do a few things. Well, if we look over in our plan, we remember the first thing we want to do is we want to hide the too low feedback. So in Actions, I'm going to double click. I'm going to type H for hide. Now that I've typed H for hide, I'm going to look for the feedback too low. And then I want to do the opposite. I want to show, type S for show, and it's my second S. And I'm going to look for feedback too high. Great. The other thing I need to do is I need to decrement my tries remaining so that they can't guess forever. So I'm going to look for select action. I'm going to type D, and my second D takes me to decrement. And then I'm going to decrement the tries remaining variable, and it says, well, how much do you want to decrease it by? I'm going to decrease it by 1. Great. So now we have our very first condition. Let's read this. It says, if the text entry box is greater than our rand number, then hide the too low feedback and show the too high feedback, and decrease tries remaining by 1. Now I'm going to name this. Up top, you notice I've got these 3 options that say untitled. This is actually the decision that we're working with right now. So I'm going to double click on that decision. Double click on it, and I'm going to name this one too high. Great. Now that I've got too high, I'm going to go over to the next one, double click, and name this one too low. And similarly to the too high condition, I need to ask if the text entry box is too low, and if so, do many of these same actions. So in this case, I'm going to look in here. I'm going to look for if the variable text entry box 1 is less than my variable rand number. So I'll choose variable, and in this case I'll choose rand num. Then what I want to do is I want to hide the too high feedback, feedback too high, and I want to show my too low feedback, feedback too low. The other thing I want to do is I want to decrement, so I'm going to type D twice, and I'm going to decrement my tries remaining by 1. Great, so now I've created a too high and a too low. Now I'm going to click on this third option over here where it says untitled, this third condition, and in this decision is going to be just right. Okay, so the condition in this case is if the I'm going to double click on variable, and if the text entry box is exactly equal to this variable randNum, click on variable and go to randNum. Then all I want to do is I want to jump to slide, and so I type J, and in this case I want to jump to the win slide. And that's all I really need to do in that case. So I've got too high, too low, and just right. There's one more thing I need to do, and you notice I'm kind of out of decisions here. The nice thing about advanced actions in Adobe Captivate is I can add more decisions. So I'm going to click on, I've got too high, too low, just right. Now I've got one more here that I've added by clicking the plus button. And I'm going to say out of tries. Now that I'm out of tries, I need to check an interesting condition here. What I need to do is I need to see if my tries remaining is 0, then jump to the lose slide. Now, this is an interesting way of looking at things. The way that advanced actions are executed in Adobe Captivate is the script is executed top to bottom, left to right. What that means is that the computer is first going to look at the too high condition, and it'll execute the too high condition if that's true. From there, it's going to move on to the too low condition, and it'll move down the too low condition, and then it'll go just right. And then it'll move on to this next condition. And so if we've executed each of those conditions, it'll then also execute this third or this next condition. So it's kind of a way of adding a new if statement to the end of my code. So in this case, I want to say if the variable, so I'm going to double click on here, if the variable tries remaining is equal to 0, so in this case I want to check if it's equal to a literal 0. Then what I want to do in my actions is I want to jump to slide. And in this case I want to jump right to the lose slide. I want to skip over that win slide that exists in there. So now that I've done that, I've got my 4 different decisions that I can make, and I'm going to save this as an action, and now it should say my script was saved successfully. I can close my advanced actions menu, and now just like I needed to attach the action to something on my setup script, I also need to attach this new check answer, and the most sense makes to attach that script to the submit button. So I'm going to click on the submit button, and over in the properties panel I'm going to choose the actions submenu, and on success I don't want it to go to the next slide. I want it to execute this advanced action, and the advanced action I want isn't the setup action, so I'm going to click on that script drop down. I'm going to click on check answer. And now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and leave it at infinite attempts, because it's not actually going to be infinite, because I've set up my own little script to decrement tries remaining, and if that tries remaining gets to 0, it is going to go somewhere else. So I'll let my script handle how many times somebody can try answering, and I will let right now infinite attempts remain so that we can keep entering answers into there. And now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and preview this and see if my game works. I'm going to preview in browser. And I have my setup. I can see I've got my current random number is 367. This is showing for debugging purposes. And I've got my guesses remaining at 3. So if I were to guess, let's say 400, I'm going to guess a little bit high. I would expect to see too high. Sure enough, 400 gives me too high. If I guess 300, I would expect it to be too low. And that changes too low. Now if I guess right on at 367, and you notice my guesses remaining decremented each time, this should take me to the win condition. Yay, I got it! Oh, that's really curious. After 3 seconds, that slide went directly to the lose condition slide. So that's not exactly the way we want it. Let's test one more right away, the rest of our script, to see if we can get a lose condition and just skip over that win slide. So right now we see our current random number was generated again at 892, so I'm going to guess 900 and submit. I'm going to guess 800 and submit. And I'm going to guess low again, I'll say 850 and submit. And this should take us right to our lose slide, because our guesses remaining should now become 0, and that last script will now become true, that last condition on our script. And sure enough, it skipped right over the win slide and took us to the lose slide. So we have one more thing to solve. And if we look at this, we say, well, when we went to our got it slide, it played for 3 seconds, but then it automatically advanced. Well, the reason for that is because slides by default are going to automatically continue on. One way of making them stop is to add a button to the slide or some type of interaction. When we add an interaction to the slide, Captivate tells the slide not to auto-advance, but to wait for the interaction to occur on that button. And we don't really want a button to appear on this slide, so we're going to use a little sort of a hack that I've seen used in Captivate. I'm going to go to Interactions, click on Button, and I'm going to add a button to this slide. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this button and I am going to place it just barely on the slide. Okay, so that button is just off to the corner, barely showing. Right? Now I can change the style and maybe change the opacity to be 10%, so it's not quite as visible. I could change it to be 1%. It does need to be somewhat on there, so if I completely get rid of it, this won't work. So let's go ahead and preview now and see. Our whole problem that we had before was when we got the answer, the slide played for 3 seconds and then advanced automatically. So this time I'm going to go ahead and guess the right number immediately and click on Submit. And now you see this button is hiding over here in the corner because I put it over there. It says got it, but now it stops. So that's one way of making sure that we don't auto-advance, is putting a button on there and just hiding the button in the corner. It does need to be on the slide, even just the slightest bit. I could put this much further off the slide if I were to go back and change my view in Captivate and got it. Right now my view is zoomed in. What I need to do is zoom out just a little bit. Now I can see this button here off the corner, and so I'm going to take it, I'm really going to hide it in the corner, and I'm just going to barely make it visible on my screen. And now when I were to, if I were to go and preview this, that button is just going to be a little rectangle in the corner. I'm going to guess 578 immediately, and it's over here in the corner, kind of unnoticeable. I can make it white and completely invisible to the player. And that's it. You've now created a Got Your Number game. You could probably go ahead and add a lot of modifications to this game. But just as a review, some of the things that we learned in Advanced Actions is we learned how to create an advanced action, how to attach it to some type of event, such as on-screen enter or on success of clicking a button. And then we also used a little bit of JavaScript in order to generate a random number. In doing that JavaScript, we learned about the Captivate API interface, which is the way that we access the interface in code and using Captivate. Any variable that I create in code has to also, if I want to see it on my screen, I have to use that interface method in order to set that variable to a variable that I've created within Captivate itself. So there's lots of ways that you could take this game and you can modify it, and I hope that you've learned about advanced actions a little bit and multiple conditions that you might give to advanced actions. So go out and have fun.